Vladimir Ilyich Lenin. Two Tactics of Social Democracy in the Democratic Revolution, published July 1905. Chapter 7. The Tactics of Eliminating the Conservatives from the Government. The article in the organ of the Tiflis Menshevik Committee, Social Democrat, No. 1, to which we have just referred, is entitled The Zemsky Sober and Our Tactics. Its author has not yet entirely forgotten our program. He advances the slogan of a republic, but this is how he discusses tactics. It is possible to point to two ways of achieving this goal. A republic, either completely ignore the Zemsky Sober that is being convened by the government and defeat the government by force of arms, form a revolutionary government and convene a constituent assembly, or declare the Zemsky Sober the center of our actions, influencing its composition and activity by force of arms and either forcibly compelling it to declare itself a constituent assembly or convening a constituent assembly through it. These two tactics differ very sharply from one another. Let us see which of them is more advantageous to us. This is how the Russian Neuskraists set forth the ideas that were subsequently incorporated in the resolution we have analyzed. Note that this was written before the Battle of Tsushima, 8, when the Bulygin scheme had not yet seen the light of the day. Even the liberals were losing patience and expressing their lack of confidence in the pages of the legal press, but a Neuskraist social democrat proved more credulous than the liberals. He declares that the Zemsky Sober is being convened and trusts the Tsar so much that he proposes to make this as yet non-existent Zemsky Sober, or, possibly, State Duma or Advisory Legislative Assembly, the center of our actions. Being more outspoken and straightforward than the authors of the resolution adopted at the conference, our Tiflisian does not put the two tactics, which he expands with inimitable naivete, on a par, but declares that the second is more advantageous. Just listen. The first tactics. As you know, the coming revolution is a bourgeois revolution. That is, its purpose is to effect such changes in the present system as are of interest not only to the proletariat but to the whole of bourgeois society. All classes are opposed to the government, even the capitalists themselves. The militant proletariat and the militant bourgeoisie are in a certain sense marching together and jointly attacking the autocracy from different sides. The government is completely isolated and lacks public sympathy. For this reason it is very easy to destroy it. The Russian proletariat as a whole is not yet sufficiently class-conscious and organized to be able to carry out the revolution by itself. And even if it were able to do so, it would carry through a proletarian, socialist, revolution and not a bourgeois revolution. Hence, it is in our interest that the government remain without allies, that it be unable to disunite the opposition, unable to ally the bourgeoisie to itself and leave the proletariat isolated. So, it is in the interests of the proletariat that the Tsarist government shall not be able to disunite the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. Is it not by mistake that this Georgian organ is called Social Democrat instead of Osvoboznaya? And note its peerless philosophy of democratic revolution. Is it not obvious that this poor Tiflisian is hopelessly confused by the pedantic Gvostist interpretation of the concept bourgeois revolution? He discusses the question of the possible isolation of the proletariat in a democratic revolution and forgets about a trifle, about the peasantry. Of the possible allies of the proletariat he knows and favors the landowning Zemstvoists and is not aware of the peasants. And this in the Caucasus. Well, were we not right when we said that by its method of reasoning the Neuskra was sinking to the level of the monarchist bourgeoisie instead of raising the revolutionary peasantry to the position of our ally? Otherwise the defeat of the proletariat and the victory of the government is inevitable. This is just what the autocracy is striving for. In its Zemsky Sober it will undoubtedly attract to its side the representatives of the nobility, of the Zemstvos, the cities, the universities and similar bourgeois institutions. It will try to appease them with petty concessions and thereby reconcile them to itself. Strengthened in this way, it will direct all its blows against the working people who will have been isolated. It is our duty to prevent such an unfortunate outcome. But can this be done of the first method? Let us assume that we paid no attention whatever to the Zemsky Sober, but started to prepare for insurrection ourselves, and one fine day came out in the streets armed and ready for battle. The result would be that we would be confronted not with one but with two enemies, the government and the Zemsky Sober. While we were preparing, they would manage to come to terms, enter into an agreement with one another, draw up a constitution advantageous to themselves and divide power between them. These tactics are of direct advantage to the government, and we must reject them in the most energetic fashion. Now this is frank. We must resolutely reject the tactics of preparing an insurrection because meanwhile the government will come to terms with the bourgeoisie. Can one find in the old literature of the most rabid economism anything that would even approximate such a disgrace to revolutionary social democracy? That insurrections and outbreaks of workers and peasants are occurring, first in one place and then in another, is a fact. The Zemsky Sober, however, is a Balaygin promise. And the Social Democrat of the city of Tiflis decides to reject the tactics of preparing an insurrection and to wait for a center of influence, the Zemsky Sober. The second tactics, on the contrary, consist in placing the Zemsky Sober under our surveillance, in not giving it the opportunity to act according to its own will and enter into an agreement with the government. 1. We support the Zemsky Sober to the extent that it fights the autocracy, and we fight it in those cases when it becomes reconciled with the autocracy. By energetic interference and force we shall cause a split among the deputies to rally the radicals to our side, eliminate the conservatives from the government and thus put the whole Zemsky Sober on the path of revolution. Thanks to such tactics the government will always remain isolated, the opposition strong, and the establishment of a democratic system will thereby be facilitated. Well, let anyone now say that we exaggerate. The newscroists turn to the most vulgar semblance of economism. This is positively like the famous powder for exterminating flies. You catch the fly, sprinkle it with the powder and the fly will die. Split the deputies of the Zemsky Sober by force, eliminate the conservatives from the government and the whole Zemsky Sober will take the path of revolution. No Jacobin armed insurrection of any sort, but just like that, in genteel, almost parliamentary fashion, influencing the members of the Zemsky Sober. Poor Russia. It has been said that she always wears the old-fashioned bonnets that Europe discards. We have no parliament as yet, even Balaygin has not yet promised one, but we have any amount of parliamentary cretinism. 9. How should this interference be effected? First of all, we shall demand that the Zemsky Sober be convened on the basis of universal and equal suffrage, direct elections and secret ballot. Simultaneously with the announcement 3, of this method of election, complete freedom to carry on the election campaign, that is, freedom of assembly, of speech and of the press, the inviolability of the electors and the candidates and the release of all political prisoners must be made law. 4. The elections themselves must be fixed as late as possible so that we have sufficient time to inform and prepare the people. And since the drafting of the regulations governing the convocation of the Sober has been entrusted to a commission headed by Balaygin, Minister of the Interior, we should also exert pressure on this commission and on its members. 5. If the Balaygin Commission refuses to satisfy our demands 6, and grants suffrage only to property owners, then we must interfere in these elections and, by revolutionary means, force the voters to elect progressive candidates and in the Zemsky Sober demand a constituent assembly. Finally, we must, by all possible measures, demonstrations, strikes and insurrection if need be, compel the Zemsky Sober to convene a constituent assembly or declare itself to be such. The armed proletariat must constitute itself the defender of the constituent assembly, and both together 7, will march forward to a democratic republic. Such are the social democratic tactics, and they alone will secure us victory. Let not the reader imagine that this incredible nonsense is simply a maiden attempt at writing on the part of some newer screw adherent with no authority or influence. No, this is what is stated in the organ of an entire committee of newer screwists, the Tiflis Committee. More than that, this nonsense has been openly endorsed by the Iskra in number 100, of which we read the following about that issue of the Social Democrat. The first issue is edited in a lively and talented manner. The experienced hand of a capable editor and writer is perceptible. It may be said with all confidence that the newspaper will brilliantly carry out the task it has set itself. Yes. If that task is clearly to show all and sundry the utter ideological decay of Newiskra, then it has indeed been carried out brilliantly. No one could have expressed the Newiskra degradation to liberal bourgeois opportunism in a more lively, talented and capable manner.